Hello, I wanted to put another video out today because I'm going away for the weekend. I'm going up north to a stag party, so I'm not going to be able to put anything out for the next couple of days. We talked last time about Justin Martyr and his relative just total lack of knowledge about the gospel stories, about the names of the gospel authors, about the fact I think that he never even mentions one of the authors of the gospels. He does talk about memoirs of the apostles called gospels or so-called gospels, which signposts perhaps the possibility that he has not read them. So I wanted to just go through some other early Christians. Now, when I say early, these guys come 120, 150, 160 years after Jesus' supposed death. Just going to read to you a section of one of my books, soon to be published. Please find a copy online. I'll give information out about them as soon as they're there, ready to be bought. This is Logos as dominant theme in other Christian works. Okay, a thorough survey of early fathers was not within the scope of this chapter, but in passing it may be apt to mention two other early Christians also considered established believers in a human Christ by the church. They too leave out any and all mention of a single detail of Jesus in the historical record, and both come immediately before the first solid evidence of an affirming fourfold canonical formula with its authors in tow. Theophilus of Antioch, writing in the 180s, who never even mentions Jesus Christ, funny enough, or Christians, Minucius Felix, at around the same time, give surviving accounts. But what is peculiar, I'm actually going to mention three here, but what is peculiar about them is that they seem far more interested in assigning Jesus this Logos status. As we have seen, this is another strong indicator that the Old Testament chimera of the anointed was more being syncretized, was by now being syncretized into its kind of Greco-Roman surroundings within the empire, precisely as Philo of Alexandria adumbrated in speaking in tongues, discussed in our other works. So I actually have a video of Logos, this Logos theology I did quite a long time ago now. It's in 3 parts. You can take a look at it. And I'm looking at early Christians. I mean, Christians within up to the 3rd and 4th century that still have this notion of the Logos on their tongues and Jesus Christ as the Logos. Now, Jesus, as I just said, the Logos, I should say, is exemplified in Philo's work. In one of the works, he talks quite a lot about it, but he doesn't say anything about Jesus Christ. This is a pre-Christian, Hellenized idea, Jewish but Hellenized as well. Theophilus, writing around 180, likely just before Irenaeus composed his tome, only mentions gospel once in ad Ortolissum 3:12. So ad Ortolissum 3:12, concerning the righteousness which the law enjoyed, the prophets proclaimed, and the gospel fulfilled. He never attributes it to any author, nor does he use the plural. He appears to know the first verse of John 1:1, as he quotes it, Cleum 2:22, but this is in relation to the Logos and could reflect a remnant of a previous theological discourse now transported into the Gospel of John. So this might have existed as a saying in an oral form before John came along. This quite easily could have been, given how late John is. But it's late, but remember, this idea of Logos coming to earth, becoming man, is actually It's old. It's older than John, certainly, but we can see how this might be a revelation. He even calls John merely an inspired man in the same verse. Never mentions him again, and never mentions he wrote a gospel. In this work, he refers to the Logos 10 times, perfectly in line with Paul's eternal, pre-existent, celestial agent of creation, Colossians 1:16. And maker of all things, while using the name Jesus Christ exactly 0 times. Minucius Felix, in his surviving work, Octavius likewise uses the Latin equivalents for logos, ratio, sermo, word, and reason, around 8 times in precisely the same mystical and celestial language, and also mentions the name Jesus Christ exactly 0 times, guys. These are both Christians writing. If I've gotten any of this wrong, please let me know. I did try really hard to make sure that this was all correct here. So 0 times he mentions the name Jesus Christ. These are both Christians writing well into the 2nd century, producing lengthy texts, over 20,000 words. Okay, 27,000 for Octavius, and they give no indication of knowing Jesus as a recent historical figure. So there's a massive argument from silence here, and in multiple works, even in passages where we'd assume they'd cite Jesus' sayings and deeds, they don't. Even where we'd expect these Christians to speak of resurrection, they appear to outright avoid it. In fact, Felix seems to not to know a version of Christianity in which the resurrection is the cornerstone, which is extremely surprising. This is evidenced by a total omission he maintains throughout the conversation between the fictitious persons of Octavius and Caecilius. He never affirms a bodily resurrection. When Caecilius asks what single individual has returned from the dead, that we might believe it, for an example, he gives no reference to Jesus. Felix never refers to any written record. There is no mention of the cross as an item of worship, quite the opposite. Octavius 29, 2 and 3, there's no mention of Jesus' crucifixion, no apostles, and as stated, no mention of Jesus Christ at all, nor any explicit resurrection. A whole slew of propositions and counter-arguments are offered throughout the work, and much of the doctrine later attributed to the Gospels is bluntly contradicted. He specifically bewails what the Egyptians worship in their dying and resurrecting god Osiris, Octavius 21, and then he states, therefore neither are gods made from dead people, since a god cannot die, nor of people that are born, since everything which is born dies, but that is divine, which has neither rising nor setting. For why, if they were born, are they not born in the present day also? This is Octavius 21:3. Why does Felix appear to be outright denying the divine potential of life, death, and resurrection here? What can possibly be going on? He even seems to speak against the idea of a divine son, stating religion is to be defended not by killing but by dying. Not with cruelty, but with faith. Miracles do not establish truth. The true miracle is moral virtue and patient endurance. Octavius 38:7. This, of course, runs in the face of the idea that Jesus was a miracle man and that the miracles were really important, and they affirmed Jesus' deity, Christhood. While he does affirm some vague notion of resurrection, Octavius 34:11, it is highly evasive, and it doesn't refer, as far as I'm aware, to Jesus Christ. Even when positively affirming Christ's beliefs, he never states that Jesus or his Logos rose from the grave. The impression left is of a Christian community that did not yet know the gospel stories. Yet this time But his time, is around 160 to 180 CE. And Athenagoras of Athens, 176 to 180, again around the same time CE, another Christian whose works still survive intact, likewise never mentions Jesus Christ of Nazareth or any variation thereof, nor does he allude to any written gospel. He also provides no clear recollections of any New Testament narrative. Instead, he refers simply to the Son of God and the Logos, which as Philo does, and much as Philo does. Two examples. The Son of God is the Logos of the Father, both in idea and in operation. Through him and by him all things were made, the Father and the Son being one. Therefore, we acknowledge one God, the creator of the universe, and all things have come into being through the Logos, who is from him. This is Apologia 24. He also asserts our faith is not from human teaching, but just as God declared and taught, so we accept it, not from human teaching. Is Jesus not a human? This is echoed in Paul. Apologia, if we read Galatians, Apologia 9:1. So, not from the Gospels, but from divine revelation, just as Paul echoes in Galatians 1:11-12. Have a look. As we should expect from a convert in Greece, this is highly Platonic and seemingly unencumbered by any literalist teachings whatsoever. You'll find that if Jesus, Logos, had quoted or done anything significant as a human figure, these three Christians might have been interested. You'd think that if they, Alas, they were not, and the pattern grows more pronounced. These are relatively late early Christians, and all of them are considered to be genuine Christians by relatively early Orthodox sources. Felix is recommended by fathers such as Lactantius, Divine Institutes 5:1, and Jerome, de various Illustrabus 58, while Athenagoras is likewise cited by Jerome in the same work, de various Illustribus 31, and Philippus Side, Christian History, fragment 2. Philippus Side, I think, existed before 500, I think, from what I recall. So, these Christians are writing in separate provinces, I think, obviously from Irenaeus, but their Christ seems to be one with a Logos that is dominant in these Christian teachings. He is celestial, the Word, the Spirit, the vibration which creates all things. He is the spoken Word of God himself, who is God and who is kind of separate from God in the way that he creates. I'll leave that there. It's worth really thinking about this, though. These are some of the only Christians we find in the 2nd century. Irenaeus, Clement's first, but again, he is completely unknowing of the gospel accounts. Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, these three here. Plutarch, I can't remember his name. What's wrong with me? Plutarch, like I say. Polycarp, Polycarp, very small letter, again, really doesn't affirm anything much in the Gospels. You can read it in 5 minutes. This is what we have that's left to us. It's really Irenaeus who begins to flesh out Christianity properly and talk about 4 canonical Gospels with the names of the evangelists attached to them. At the same time these guys are writing, they don't seem to know about a Gospel Jesus. So it is perfectly possible that there were other things going on in Rome, and that this Roman construct of Jesus Christ is being created to fill in now a more human story from essentially a Gnostic idea of a kind of Platonic Logos who is all as Paul really makes clear, and many, many more times than he does when he's talking about a born of a woman, or flesh-made Christ, right? And there are multiple ways to read those verses. So all interesting, all worth thinking about. The historical basis for the Christian story is just completely lacking, or when you really expect to find it, it's terrible, really. And this is why I'm doing this work, so that we can establish now what really was the true faith of Christianity, the Gnostic, the knowledge of revelation, of the same stuff Buddhists, Taoists and so on, who are clean living, doing well in life, meditating, getting square with themselves. That's where the real gnosis is, ladies and gents. Anyway, peace out. See you later.